Imagine walking into a high-end jewelry store, expecting to be treated like a valued customer, but instead, you're met with arrogance, rude comments, and disrespect. Now imagine that this poor treatment is directed at an elderly woman, someone who's just looking to buy a simple piece of jewelry. It's a scenario that's all too familiar in today's world of customer service. But there's a shocking twist in this story that no one saw coming. On a sunny afternoon, in a chic boutique tucked away in one of the wealthiest parts of town, an elderly woman strolled in, her silver hair perfectly styled, her presence graceful, yet humble. She wasn't flashy or loud, just an ordinary woman with an extraordinary connection to someone famous. Though she wasn't wearing it on her sleeve, the staff, however, didn't care about who she was or what she represented. In fact, one employee in particular seemed to view her as just another difficult customer. It wasn't that the woman was asking for anything out of the ordinary. She simply wanted to browse, maybe purchase a beautiful necklace that caught her eye in the display case. But the moment she stepped up to the counter, things took an unexpected turn. The young employee, with his sharp suit and overly confident demeanor, looked at her with a kind of dismissive judgment that many older people have experienced. He made snide remarks, treating her as though her age had made her invisible, perhaps a little too old to be buying something fancy, or out of touch with modern trends. His words were laced with a quiet arrogance, as he assumed this woman couldn't possibly afford the lavish jewelry that surrounded them. What he didn't know, however, was that this elderly woman was far more than just a regular customer. She wasn't some out-of-place figure wandering into the boutique for the first time. She was the mother of one of Hollywood's biggest stars, Keanu Reeves, the same Keanu Reeves whose name would make any jewelry store employee do a double take. The same Keanu Reeves who had graced the big screen in action-packed films and became a beloved figure, not only for his talent, but for his kindness. As the employee continued to make these cutting remarks, the elderly woman remained calm, her expression unreadable. She didn't argue, she didn't yell, but what the young man failed to realize was that there was far more to her than met the eye. She wasn't just any elderly woman. She was someone who knew how to handle herself in any situation. She had lived a life of quiet dignity, and she had seen things most people could never imagine. But in this moment, her patience was being tested. And it wasn't the first time. Unbeknownst to the employee, Keanu Reeves's mother had encountered this type of behavior many times before. People had always underestimated her, often assuming she was just a regular person because she chose to live quietly and stay out of the spotlight. But she wasn't one to boast about her son, nor did she feel the need to announce who she was. The last thing on her mind was causing a scene, so she simply took the employee's rude behavior in stride, choosing to leave the store rather than escalate things. But not before giving him a glimpse of the potential consequences. As she turned to leave, the employee, still oblivious to who she was, made one last snide remark. "Enjoy your little trinket," he said with a smirk. And that was the moment that things began to shift. As the elderly woman walked out of the store, her presence lingered in the air. The young employee watched her go, completely unaware of the bombshell that was about to drop. Only a few moments later, the manager, who had been watching the interaction from a distance, approached him with a look of disbelief. "Do you know who that was?" the manager asked, his voice laced with shock. The young employee, still unaware of the significance of the encounter, shrugged. "Some old lady who wanted to buy a necklace. Nothing special." The manager's face turned pale as he took a deep breath, preparing to deliver news that would undoubtedly shake the young man to his core. That was Keanu Reeves's mother. The words hung in the air for a moment, and the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. It wasn't just a case of an elderly woman being disrespected. It was a monumental mistake that could cost the store dearly. The employee, stunned, immediately realized the gravity of his actions. But it was too late. The damage had already been done. The elderly woman had left. And her son, a man known for his loyalty and fierce protection of his family, would undoubtedly hear about what had happened. And when he did, there was no telling how far he would go to right the wrongs his mother had faced. The situation that had begun with a simple purchase in a jewelry store was now about to spiral into something much bigger. The employee's casual dismissal of an elderly woman had just set off a chain of events that could change his life and the reputation of the store forever. But the story doesn't end here. As news of the incident begins to spread, whispers of retaliation, legal action, and potential public backlash swirl in the air. The jewelry store, which had once been an exclusive, high-end establishment, now finds itself at the center of a media storm. And as for the employee, he begins to realize just how wrong he was. But will it be enough to fix the situation? And how will Keanu Reeves respond when he learns of the insult his mother endured? The story is just beginning, and the next chapter promises to be even more shocking than the last. Stay tuned, because this tale is far from over. The aftermath of the incident began to unfold quickly. Word spread about the rude treatment that Keanu Reeves' mother had faced in the jewelry store. At first, it was just a whisper between a few employees, but soon, the story leaked to a local news outlet. A minor detail had changed everything. The revelation that the elderly woman was Keanu Reeves' mother was like throwing gasoline on a fire. In an instant, what had seemed like a small misunderstanding transformed into an explosive scandal. The media, always hungry for a juicy story, latched onto the tale with relentless fervor. The young employee, whose name was Andrew, was now under intense scrutiny. His phone rang off the hook, flooded with calls from reporters, asking for his side of the story. It was surreal to him. He had never imagined that something as trivial as a bad interaction with a customer could spiral out of control so quickly. But the truth was that Andrew had made a colossal mistake. He had assumed that his position in the high-end jewelry store placed him on a pedestal, where he could afford to treat people with arrogance and disregard. He didn't care who the customer was. He saw them only as another paycheck. That was his reality, and it was that mindset that had led to his downfall. But there was more to this story than just Andrew's ignorance. As the media storm intensified, the store's reputation began to crumble. It wasn't just about one rude employee anymore. It was about the whole culture that had been allowed to fester in the store. The manager, Mr. Walker, had tried to maintain a polished exterior, but his failure to intervene in the moment exposed the deep-seated issues at play. His reluctance to address Andrew's behavior was a sign of something larger, perhaps a lack of training, perhaps a prioritization of wealth over customer service. The more people dug into the store's history, the more cracks appeared. Customers began to share their own experiences of being mistreated, all of them mirroring the same sense of disrespect and condescension. Keanu Reeves, meanwhile, was unaware of the controversy until his publicist called him. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal. Celebrities were used to seeing their names dragged through the mud for trivial matters. But as Keanu listened to the full story, something clicked. His protective instinct kicked in. His mother, Patricia, had always been a private, unassuming person, someone who never sought the spotlight or the attention that came with being the mother of a famous actor. She was content, living her life quietly, away from the chaos of Hollywood. Keanu had grown up in a modest household where his mother had done everything she could to make sure he had a grounded and humble upbringing. The thought that someone would treat her with such disrespect stung deeply. Patricia, on the other hand, was unfazed by the public backlash. While the incident had shaken her at first, she wasn't one to make a scene or seek revenge. She had seen her fair share of difficult situations and learned long ago that fighting back wasn't always the best approach. In fact, when Keanu had called her to check on her, she had reassured him that she was fine. "Don't worry about it," she had told him, her voice calm and composed. "It's just an unfortunate situation. People can be rude sometimes, but I'm all right." Keanu wasn't convinced though. His mother's well-being meant the world to him, and the idea that someone had insulted her, even if unintentionally, didn't sit well with him. He had faced plenty of challenges in his career, but protecting his family from harm was a different kind of fight, one he wasn't prepared to let go. As the days passed, Andrew found himself sinking deeper into regret. He couldn't shake the image of the elderly woman walking out of the store. Her expression unreadable, but her silence louder than any words could have been. He knew he had messed up. There was no denying that, but as the pressure mounted, Andrew started to wonder if there was a way out of the mess he had created. Could he apologize? Would that be enough? He had seen the reactions online, the harsh comments, the mockery, the disgust directed at him. It was becoming clear that the public wasn't going to let him off the hook easily. He began to question everything he thought he knew about his job and his place in the world. Maybe he wasn't as untouchable as he had once believed. Meanwhile, Patricia kept to her routine. She didn't check the news or pay much attention to the internet. She didn't need to. She had lived long enough to know that public opinion was fleeting and rarely based on the full story. But as the days wore on, it became impossible for her to avoid the growing buzz around the incident. Her friends and family began to call, asking her if she was okay, if she needed anything. The support was comforting, but Patricia remained focused on what truly mattered. The noise around her didn't define her. It was the values she held: kindness, integrity, and grace. That mattered. Yet even with this strength, she couldn't deny a lingering thought. What would Keanu do? The tension in the air was thick. Keanu had been quiet, but everyone knew he was about to take action. He wasn't the type to make a scene, but when it came to his mother, the gloves were off. In the back of his mind, he knew what needed to be done. He had a reputation for being kind and humble. But when it came to protecting his family, he didn't hold back. As he mulled over his options, the thought of confronting the store directly felt like the right course of action, but he didn't want to just make a public statement. He wanted to make an impact, to show the world that no one was above accountability. But what would that look like? How far would he go to ensure that his mother's dignity was restored? The answers weren't clear yet, but one thing was certain. Keanu was about to make his move. And when he did, the entire world would be watching. The tension was building. To a boiling point, Keanu's decision was made. The time for silence was over. He didn't want to just let this story fade away with apologies that felt hollow, or public statements that would only add fuel to the fire. No, this was something far more personal to him: his mother's dignity and respect. Keanu wasn't known for stirring up controversy, but when it came to his family, he was prepared to make a stand. A few days after the media storm had reached its peak, Keanu Reeves himself appeared at the jewelry store. No one saw it coming. The store, still reeling from the backlash, had hoped the scandal might die down on its own. The young employee, Andrew, had been ordered to stay home until further notice, with the hope that things would settle before they had to face the consequences. But that wasn't going to happen. Keanu walked into the boutique with the quiet, calm demeanor that had made him a beloved figure worldwide. The store staff, initially unaware of his presence, continued with their work until the manager spotted him entering. A sudden silence spread throughout the store. Mr. Walker, the manager, froze in place, his face drained of color. He immediately recognized the actor, his thoughts racing to the very incident that had sparked this firestorm. Keanu didn't waste time. He looked directly at the manager, who had taken no action in the aftermath of the incident. "I'm here. About my mother," Keanu said, his voice firm but not loud. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, and it carried weight. The manager stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but Keanu wasn't interested in excuses. "She came here. She was treated with disrespect. I'm not going to let that slide," Keanu continued, his gaze unwavering. The store was on edge. The staff and customers, who had gathered to witness the encounter, were stunned into silence, watching as the situation reached its boiling point. Keanu wasn't there to demand a public apology. He didn't want to humiliate anyone. Instead, he wanted accountability. He wanted the world to know that kindness and respect should be given to everyone, no matter their age, status, or wealth. Keanu turned his attention to Andrew, who had been nervously watching from the back. He hadn't been prepared for this moment. The young man knew that there was no hiding from the consequences now. Keanu stepped forward, making it clear that the situation was not just about public relations. It was about integrity. "I don't need you to apologize to me," Keanu said quietly to Andrew, his voice unexpectedly calm. "But you owe her that. You owe her more than an apology. You owe her respect." Andrew, clearly shaken, nodded, his face flushed with shame. It wasn't just about the mistake he had made. It was about realizing the gravity of his actions. Keanu was right. It wasn't just about a single comment. It was about how the elderly, how people who didn't fit into certain boxes, were often treated as invisible or insignificant. Andrew had learned this lesson the hard way. Keanu's words carried weight, and the silence that followed was powerful. The store had no choice but to take responsibility. The manager, looking thoroughly defeated, promised to take corrective action, retraining staff, revising customer service policies, and, most importantly, addressing the toxic culture that had allowed such behavior to thrive. Keanu wasn't interested in empty promises, but he knew this was a necessary first step. The resolution came not just in the form of an apology from the store, but through the deeper changes that followed. News of Keanu's visit spread, and the public response was overwhelmingly positive. People praised him for standing up for his mother without creating a spectacle, for quietly demanding change without seeking revenge. It wasn't about public vindication for Keanu. It was about making the world a little bit better, a little bit more respectful. As for Patricia, Keanu's mother, she never asked for this attention. She never wanted the spotlight. But Keanu's actions had shown her a side of him that made her proud. She had always known he was a kind, humble man, but to see him stand up for what was right, especially in a world that often overlooked the quiet, kind-hearted people like her, was something that deeply moved her. In the end, the story had come full circle. The jewelry store had been forced to confront its own shortcomings, and the employee who had made the mistake had learned a valuable lesson. The public had witnessed not just an act of retribution, but one of redemption. And for Keanu and Patricia, it was a reminder of the power of family, respect, and kindness. The media eventually moved on to the next story, but the message lingered. It was a reminder that we all have a responsibility to treat others with dignity, regardless of who they are or where they come from. The ripple effects of that one moment of kindness would be felt long after the cameras stopped rolling. 4. Keanu. This wasn't just about protecting his mother. It was about showing the world that real heroes aren't just those on the silver screen. Sometimes, they're the quiet ones, the ones who act with grace, and the ones who stand up for what's right, even when no one is watching.